I never thought I would become the kind of person who double-checks door locks before bed. I never thought I'd memorize the sounds of my own house or freeze when I hear a noise at night, trying to decide whether it's normal or something else. That kind of fear always felt distant to me, like something that happened to other people in true crime stories or late-night horror videos. I used to think paranoia came from imagination. I was wrong. That all changed after 1 week last winter, a week that permanently altered the way I see safety, privacy, and what it means to live alone at the time. I lived by myself in a small house I had bought a few years earlier. It wasn't anything special, just a modest single-story place in a quiet suburban neighborhood. No history of crime, no strange reputation, nothing unusual. It was exactly the kind of house you'd expect someone with a predictable life to live in. And my life was predictable. I worked from home, ordered groceries online, and went to the gym late at night because I preferred it empty. I didn't talk to my neighbors much, not because I disliked them, but because our schedules rarely lined up. I liked my routine. It was boring, safe, and familiar. Nothing ever changed, and that consistency made me feel secure. Looking back now, I realized that routine is exactly what made me vulnerable. Because when something small felt off, I brushed it aside instead of paying attention. The first strange thing happened on a Tuesday night, or technically, early Wednesday morning. It was around 2:30 a.m. I had fallen asleep on the couch with the television still on, the volume turned low. I dozed off like that often, half listening to whatever was playing while drifting in and out of sleep. That night, something pulled me awake. It wasn't a loud bang or anything dramatic. It was a dull thump coming from the back of the house. Just one sound, soft enough that I could almost convince myself it wasn't real. I sat up slightly and listened, my brain still foggy from sleep. My first thought was that something had fallen. Maybe a cabinet door shifting or something sliding off a counter. Houses make noises, especially at night when everything is quiet. I'd heard strange sounds before and never thought twice about them. Still, I muted the television and sat there, listening. Nothing else happened. The silence stretched on, thick and empty. After a few minutes, I told myself I was being ridiculous. I turned the TV back on, stood up, and went to bed. At the time, that noise barely registered as important. If I had known what it meant, I would have reacted very differently. The next morning, I noticed something odd with the back door when I opened it. The deadbolt worked just fine, but the handle felt loose. Not broken, just off, like someone had twisted it harder than necessary. I stood there for a moment, holding the handle and testing it, trying to remember if it had always felt that way. I told myself it probably had. I made a mental note to fix it later and went on with my day. That night, I followed my usual routine. Around 11, I drove to the gym. I liked going late because there were fewer people and I could focus without feeling rushed. I stayed for about an hour and a half, then headed home. When I pulled into my driveway around midnight, something immediately caught my attention. My porch light was off. That light was always on. I never turned it off. It was one of those small habits I never changed. I sat in my car for a few seconds, staring at the dark front of the house, trying to remember. If I had turned it off before leaving, I couldn't remember doing that. Still, I convinced myself I must have. People forget small things all the time. I grabbed my keys, walked inside, and locked the door behind me. Everything looked normal, but something felt different. I don't know how else to explain it. The house looked exactly the same, but the air felt heavier somehow. I found myself walking through each room slowly, checking corners, glancing down hallways, listening for sounds. I had never done that before. It wasn't fear, exactly. More like unease, without a clear reason. After a few minutes, I told myself I was overthinking and went to bed. The next morning was Thursday, and that's when things escalated. I woke up to my alarm and reached for my phone, immediately noticing the battery percentage. 12%? That made no sense. I always charged my phone overnight, and I remembered plugging it in before going to sleep. I looked down at the charger. The cable was still connected to my phone, but the charging brick had been unplugged from the wall outlet. At first I laughed it off. I tried to convince myself I must have knocked it loose in my sleep. But the more I thought about it, the less sense that explanation made. My phone was still neatly placed on the nightstand, not in the bed with me. If I had yanked the charger out accidentally, I would have noticed. That was the first moment I felt genuine concern that night. Instead of going to sleep right away, I stayed up. I turned off the television and sat in the dark, listening. Every creak of the house made my muscles tense. Around 3 a.m, I heard something that made my heart race. Slow thumps. They were coming from the back of the house again. Deliberate. Spaced out. Too rhythmic to be random. I held my breath, listening closely. Footsteps. That was the word that flashed through my mind, even though I tried to push it away. After a few seconds, the sounds stopped. The silence returned. Heavier than before. I told myself it had to be outside. Maybe someone walking past the house. Maybe an animal. I lived in the suburbs. It wasn't impossible, but I barely slept after that. The next day, I found muddy shoe prints near the back door. They weren't clear prints with visible tread patterns. They were smeared, uneven, like someone had tried to wipe their shoes before. Stepping fully inside, I stared at them for a long time, my mind struggling to process what I was seeing. I hadn't gone outside in mud. I hadn't had anyone over. There was no explanation that made sense. When I inspected the back door more closely, I noticed faint scratch marks around the lock. They were subtle, easy to miss, but once I saw them, I couldn't unsee them. It looked like someone had used something thin to pry at it. That's when panic set in. I called a locksmith and told him the lock was failing. I didn't mention the footprints or the scratches. I didn't want to sound paranoid. He arrived that afternoon and replaced the lock, assuring me everything was secure. That night I pushed a chair under the back door handle and locked my bedroom door. It felt extreme, but I didn't care. I needed to feel safe. Sometime before 4 a.m, I woke up. I didn't know what woke me at first. Then I heard it tapping soft, like, right outside my bedroom door. It wasn't a knock. It sounded like fingertips gently testing the door. My body went completely still. I stared at the door, refusing to blink, listening to every tiny sound, though tapping stopped after about a minute. Then I heard soft footsteps moving away. I didn't sleep again in the morning. The chair was still under the back door handle, but the door itself was unlocked. The new lock wasn't damaged. It had simply been turned. That was the moment everything changed. Someone had been inside my house. I called the police. They searched the house and told me there was no sign of forced entry. They suggested I might have unlocked the door myself without remembering. I knew that wasn't true, but there was nothing they could do. That night, I stayed awake with every light on. Around 2 a.m, I heard a sound from the basement. The door was cracked open. When I looked down the stairs, I saw someone standing there. I slammed the door shut and ran outside. calling 911 again. When the police arrived, they brought a man out of my house in handcuffs. He was barefoot, wearing dark clothes. He didn't look at me. They found food wrappers, bottled water, and a phone charger plugged in behind the furnace. He had been living in my basement days later. I found a photo on my phone, a picture of me sleeping. Taken at 3:11 a.m., I moved shortly after. I will never feel truly safe again. Because the scariest thing isn't monsters. It's realizing someone was there the whole time, watching, waiting, and never making a sound.